was the greatest xenobiologist in the galaxy, sent to study the newly discovered humans. But when she saw what our bodies could survive, her glowing eyes filled with pure horror as she whispered the words that would shake the entire universe. What the hell is wrong with human biology? Before we dive deeper into the story, please subscribe. It costs you nothing but helps Stellar HFY a lot. The grand archive chamber of the neutral observation station was deathly silent, broken only by the low, constant hum of quantum servers buried deep within the reinforced walls. The air carried a faint metallic tang from the life support recyclers, and the vast circular platform at the center glowed with a soft, ethereal blue light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the station's hidden heart. Lyra stood motionless at the exact center of that platform, her tall, graceful frame illuminated from below. Her deep cerulean skin shimmered faintly under the light, the natural bioluminescent patterns tracing elegant, swirling designs across her high cheekbones, smooth forehead, slender neck, and delicate collarbones. Those patterns usually glowed with calm, analytical confidence, soft greens and tranquil blues that reflected centuries of disciplined scientific pursuit. Tonight, however, her large, light green eyes held a glint of uneasy anticipation, a flicker of something almost primal that she had not felt in over 200 years. In her long career spanning 240 years, senior xenobiologist Lyra had personally studied the physiology of more than 1,400 sentient species across the known galaxy. She had dissected the crystalline nervous systems of the silicon-based Litheri, mapped the photosynthetic veins of the gentle Floraxi, and documented the extreme pressure adaptations of the abyssal Kravax. Every single one of them obeyed the same sacred, immutable rules of biology: predictable physiological limits, fragile organic structures, and clear, merciful breaking points. Life, in her experience, was elegant but ultimately finite, a delicate balance carefully maintained by the universe itself. But the file now floating before her in a shimmering holographic display was different. Terribly, impossibly different. Classified, Humanity, SOL3 Medical Archives Access Level. Omega. For 18 long months, the Galactic Concord had kept this data sealed behind layers of quantum encryption and diplomatic silence. Rumors had spread like venomous spores through the opulent council chambers on the core worlds. Some delegates refused to utter the word human aloud, as if speaking it might summon catastrophe. Others whispered in darkened alcoves of Deathworlders who laughed in the face of extinction events that would annihilate entire civilizations. Lyra had dismissed most of those tales as the hysterical exaggerations of lesser minds, until the authorization code finally arrived on her private terminal earlier that cycle. Now, standing alone in the archive chamber, she felt the weight of that decision pressing against her chest like an invisible gravity well. Senior xenobiologist Lyra, the station AI intoned in its cold, perfectly mechanical voice, full unrestricted access granted. Proceed with caution. Anomalous data may induce psychological strain. Her long, elegant fingers, tipped with delicate silver rings etched with ancient Vayari runes, hovered uncertainly over the holographic interface. For one brief, trembling moment, something deep and primal in her chest screamed at her to close the file, to walk away, to preserve the comforting order of her scientific worldview. But curiosity, that ancient and dangerous fire that had driven her species to the stars, burned brighter than fear. She tapped the screen. The archive exploded into life around her. Thousands upon thousands of files cascaded downward like a storm of falling stars, surrounding her in a swirling vortex of data. Medical records from primitive battlefields. Autopsy reports conducted under flickering fluorescent lights. Grainy battlefield footage captured by body cams. Survival statistics that defied every known model of mortality. Each document bore the same chilling red stamp: human physiological anomaly. Lyra drew in a slow, measured breath, but her bioluminescent patterns betrayed her, flickering nervously from calm green to anxious amber. She reached out and selected the first file with a hesitant gesture. A human male, drenched in his own blood, staggered into a primitive emergency room on Sol 3. His heart had been nicked by the projectile. One lung had collapsed entirely. By every biological law Lyra knew, he should have lost consciousness within seconds and perished within minutes. Yet the Mun remained conscious, arguing loudly with the medical staff, demanding they treat his wounded comrade first even as his own lifeblood pooled on the floor beneath him. Lyra's large eyes widened in disbelief. 32 minutes later, the human lay on the operating table, chest pried open under harsh lights. 48 hours after that, the The follow-up report noted he was already sitting upright in recovery, consuming solid food, and loudly complaining about the poor quality of the hospital's caffeinated beverage. "Impossible," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the servers. She opened another file. Then another. And another. Third-degree burns covering 68% of body surface area. Multiple organ failure with 41 hours of clinical death. Complete spinal cord severance at T12 with full ambulatory recovery in 19 months. With every new case, Lyra's bioluminescent patterns flared brighter and brighter, shifting rapidly from soft green to urgent warning yellow. Her hands began to tremble uncontrollably. She could feel her dual hearts hammering wildly in her throat and chest, a rhythm she had not experienced since her early field expeditions on volatile Class 7 worlds. Unable to remain seated, she stood up so abruptly that her chair scraped loudly across the polished floor, the sound echoing unnaturally in the vast, empty chamber. "This cannot be real," she muttered, beginning to pace in tight, frantic circles. "No species survives unprotected vacuum exposure for 14 standard minutes. No species regenerates severed neural tissue at this accelerated rate. No species treats lethal doses of ionizing radiation as nothing more than a mild dermal irritation." Her voice grew louder, rising until it echoed off the curved metallic walls. "They voluntarily breathe a corrosive mixture of oxygen and nitrogen, a combination that should slowly erode their pulmonary tissues over decades. They deliberately consume ethanol, a potent neurotoxin that would induce fatal synaptic failure in 94% of all catalogued life forms. And yet they actually laugh, while their own bodies are literally tearing themselves apart from within." Lyra stopped suddenly in front of the massive reinforced viewport that dominated one wall of the chamber. Far below, the planet Earth turned slowly in the cold void, its blue oceans and swirling white clouds deceptively serene and inviting. She pressed her forehead against the chilled transparent alloy, her light green eyes reflecting the planet's gentle glow. For the first time in more than 2 centuries of meticulous scientific detachment, genuine, bone-deep fear clawed its way into her chest. She had arrived at this station expecting to produce yet another routine xenobiological profile on a newly contactable primitive species. Instead, she found herself staring into the face of something that could not, exist under any rational framework of evolutionary biology. A living abomination. A glitch written directly into the fundamental laws of life itself. Her whisper was soft, broken, and trembling with dread. "What the hell is wrong with human biology?" The archive AI responded in its calm, emotionless tone. "Would you like to proceed to Level 2 restricted files, Dr. Lyra?" Lyra closed her eyes tightly. Her bioluminescent patterns dimmed to a sickly, flickering yellow. Every instinct honed by centuries of study screamed at her to stop. She knew, with cold scientific certainty, that opening those deeper files might shatter something fundamental inside her mind forever. Yet the scientist, the relentless seeker of truth that had defined her entire existence, could not turn away. Because deep down, she had to know. Even if that knowledge terrified every civilized species in the galaxy. "Open them," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. The holographic screen flooded with even darker, more disturbing data. And Lyra, once the greatest xenobiologist of her era, felt the very fabric of the universe begin to crack and splinter around her. Lyra had not slept in 32 hours. The archive chamber's ambient lights had long since dimmed to the station's night cycle, casting long, ominous shadows across the floor. Yet the massive holographic display continued to bathe her exhausted face in a cold, unforgiving glare. Her once vibrant bioluminescent patterns now flickered erratically across her deep cerulean skin, shifting uncontrollably between sickly green and urgent warning yellow. Her large light green eyes were bloodshot, wide, and filled with a growing, gnawing horror that refused to relent. She sat hunched forward at the central console, her long fingers trembling as they scrolled relentlessly through file after impossible file. The deeper she delved, the more the ordered universe she had devoted her life to seemed to scream in protest against what she was witnessing. A human male lay sprawled on a muddy battlefield, his spine completely severed at the T12 vertebra. The field medic had grimly recorded a prognosis of permanent paralysis from the waist down and less than 6 months of survival. Yet the next recording, captured 17 months later, showed the same man walking, slowly, with only a slight limp, across a modest rehabilitation center. Neural pathways had somehow reconnected. The spinal cord had partially regenerated in ways that violated every known limit of cellular repair. Lyra slammed her fist onto the console with surprising force. "This is impossible," she cried, her voice cracking sharply in the empty room. Humans voluntarily ingested ethanol, a powerful neurotoxin that would kill most adult Vayari warriors within minutes. Their livers somehow processed the compound as if it were harmless sugar water. One particularly disturbing video showed a human male consuming enough ethanol to incapacitate 3 fully grown Krovak soldiers, then casually operating a primitive wheeled ground vehicle while singing off-key songs at the top of his lungs. Lyra's stomach twisted violently. She pressed a slender hand to her mouth, fighting back the sudden urge to vomit. A human child, barely 7 standard cycles old, had been bitten by a venomous creature whose neurotoxin dissolved nervous tissue in every previously recorded species. The child developed a dangerously high fever. For 3 full days, medics waited for the inevitable. Instead, the child recovered completely. The invading pathogen had been systematically hunted down and eradicated by an immune system that operated more like a pack of savage predators than biological defense mechanisms. Lyra stood up so abruptly that her chair toppled backward, crashing loudly against the floor. "They don't merely survive pathogens," she whispered hoarsely, beginning to pace frantically across the chamber. "They weaponize their own bodies. Their white blood cells do not simply defend, they actively hunt. They pursue. They exterminate." Sweat beaded across her forehead and mixed with the natural moisture on her skin. Her dark hair clung wetly to her neck as she moved. The bioluminescent patterns on her cheeks and collarbones flared brighter, pulsing with raw, uncontrolled panic. One human had lost nearly 70% of his liver in a catastrophic industrial accident. For most species, immediate organ transplantation would have been the only option. Yet this human's body began regenerating the missing tissue within days. Within weeks, the liver had returned to full functionality, and biochemical analysis suggested it was now even more efficient than before. Lyra let out a broken, hysterical laugh that echoed strangely through the silent chamber. She immediately clamped both hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with self-disgust at the sound. "No species does this," she muttered, rocking slightly where she stood. "No species should ever be allowed to do this." The first report described a human colony ship that had catastrophically crash-landed on a Class 9 death world. The atmosphere was lethally toxic. Radiation storms swept the surface every few hours. There was no edible food, no drinkable water, and surface temperatures that swung violently between freezing and boiling. All 312 humans aboard survived. Not only survived, they adapted with terrifying speed. They thrived. Within 3 short generations they had constructed a functioning settlement, complete with atmospheric processors, hydroponic gardens, and defensive perimeters. Lyra's legs suddenly gave out beneath her. She slid down the cold metal wall until she sat crumpled on the floor, knees drawn tightly to her chest. Hot tears slipped down her blue cheeks, hissing faintly as they made contact with her still flickering bioluminescent patterns. In the dim, oppressive silence, she whispered into the emptiness, her voice raw and utterly broken. "What the hell are you?" The station AI responded in its calm, emotionless tone once more. "Would you like medical assistance, Dr. Lyra?" She offered no reply. Instead, her gaze remained fixed on the final file still glowing ominously on the massive screen. The patient had flatlined completely. No detectable heartbeat. No measurable brain activity. Legally and clinically dead for 41 full hours. Then he woke up, and his first words were a request for coffee. Lyra curled into an even tighter ball on the floor, sobbing quietly now as her patterns dimmed until they were almost invisible against her skin. She had come expecting to document a primitive newcomer species struggling to find its place among the stars. Instead, she had uncovered something far worse. Humans were not merely resilient. They were wrong. A fundamental glitch in the grand, carefully balanced design of life itself. And the most terrifying realization of all? They knew it. And they were proud of it. Outside the viewport, Earth continued its slow, peaceful rotation, beautiful, blue, and utterly unaware of the cosmic horror it harbored. Lyra closed her eyes, tears still streaming freely. She whispered one final time, her voice filled with pure, soul-deep dread, "The universe made a terrible mistake when it allowed humans to exist." By the fourth day, Lyra was no longer functioning as a scientist. She had become a broken witness to an unfolding cosmic horror. The once pristine archive chamber had transformed into her personal prison. The air now carried a heavy, sour smell of sweat, fear, and discarded nutrient packs scattered carelessly across the floor. The holographic display glowed like an open, festering wound, casting harsh light across her gaunt features. Her deep cerulean skin had lost its healthy luminous sheen. The elegant bioluminescent patterns that once danced with graceful intelligence now flickered weakly, dull, erratic pulses of sickly yellow and faded green. She had not eaten properly in nearly 3 days. True sleep had become a distant, almost mythical memory. Her large light green eyes appeared sunken, heavily bloodshot, and burned with an unrelenting, feverish terror. Lyra sat hunched over the console, her trembling fingers forcing her deeper and deeper into the nightmare archive. She had long since moved beyond individual case studies. Now she confronted the terrifying big picture, the systematic truth underlying human biology that threatened to unravel everything she believed about the nature of life. Humans could continue to function, to fight, to run, even to laugh bitterly, while experiencing pain levels that would instantly plunge a fully grown Kravax warrior into irreversible shock. One detailed report described a human soldier who kept returning accurate fire despite a shattered femur, third-degree burns covering much of his torso, and a fully collapsed lung. He refused all painkillers. He continued fighting for 4 additional hours until reinforcements finally arrived. Lyra's breath hitched painfully in her throat. "They feel it," she whispered, her voice hoarse and cracking. "They feel every excruciating second of it. And they simply refuse to let it matter." Humans produced stem cells on demand, almost at will. Their bodies rebuilt damaged structures from near-total destruction. A liver could regenerate in mere weeks. Damaged muscle tissue repaired itself not only to original strength but often stronger. Even sections of the brain demonstrated spontaneous rewiring and compensatory growth. One documented case involved a human who had lost nearly 40% of his cerebral cortex in a horrific industrial accident. Within 18 months, he had regained full cognitive function and returned to his previous occupation. Lyra let out another broken, hysterical laugh, sharp, desperate, and filled with bottomless despair. She quickly clamped a hand over her mouth, eyes squeezing shut as fresh tears carved wet trails down her cheeks. "No species does this," she muttered, rocking slightly in her seat. "No species should ever be permitted to do this." Their white blood cells behaved like relentless hunters. They did not merely defend, they pursued, cornered, and annihilated invaders with savage efficiency. They retained perfect memory of every past threat and trained successor cells to be even more lethal. One human had survived and fully recovered from 14 distinct plagues that had previously eradicated entire colonies of other species. The pathogens had not simply failed to kill him, his body had turned them into biological weapons against future infections. Lyra stood up suddenly, knocking over a tall stack of data pads that clattered across the floor. She paced the small chamber like a caged predator, her wet hair sticking uncomfortably to her neck and face. "They are not built for mere survival," she whispered frantically. "They are engineered for total war. Their biology itself is a weapon of mass destruction pointed directly at the heart of the universe." She paused before the viewport once more. Earth turned slowly below, its peaceful blue surface now appearing almost mocking in its innocence. The sight sent a fresh wave of nausea through her. Humans endured psychological trauma that should have shattered any sane sentient mind beyond repair. Instead, they adapted. They transformed horror into fuel for continued existence. They formed interpersonal bonds so powerful they would willingly die rather than abandon their companions. They laughed defiantly in the face of certain extinction. They pressed forward when every logical model, every probabilistic calculation, demanded surrender. One particularly detailed report once again described the human colony ship crash on the Class 9 Death World. Toxic atmosphere. Lethal radiation storms. Complete lack of resources. Temperatures oscillating between freezing and boiling. All 312 humans survived. They did more than survive, they adapted with horrifying ingenuity. They constructed shelters from wreckage. They engineered crude atmospheric filters. Within 3 generations they had transformed that hellish rock into a functioning, self-sustaining settlement. Lyra screamed. It was a raw, primal sound torn from the depths of her being, the anguished cry of a brilliant mind watching 2 full centuries of accumulated knowledge burn to ashes before her eyes. She dropped to her knees in the center of the chamber, sobbing uncontrollably. Her bioluminescent patterns dimmed until they were nearly invisible against her skin. The universe made a mistake, she gasped between heaving sobs. A beautiful, terrible, unforgivable mistake when it allowed humans to exist. The station AI spoke softly. Dr. Lyra, your vital signs indicate extreme distress. Would you like medical assistance? She offered no answer. Instead, she lifted her tear-streaked face toward the glowing screen and whispered into the darkness with pure, bone-deep dread, they are not merely a species. They are a glitch in the grand design of life itself. And somewhere in the shattered depths of her once orderly mind, Lyra understood the most terrifying truth of all. The galaxy had just opened Pandora's box. And the monster waiting inside was smiling. Lyra stood before the emergency council transmission like a ghost of her former elegant self. Her once radiant deep blue skin appeared dull and lifeless under the harsh transmission lighting. The beautiful bioluminescent patterns that had once flowed with graceful intelligence now flickered weakly, erratic, sickly pulses of yellow and faded green. Her light green eyes were deeply sunken, heavily bloodshot, and burned with manic, feverish intensity. Wet strands of dark hair clung messily to her face and neck. She had not slept in 6 days. This was no longer a scientific presentation. This was a desperate warning screamed from the crumbling edge of sanity. The holographic chamber materialized around her. 23 representatives of the most powerful species in the galaxy appeared one by one on the massive curved screen. Ancient Vayari elders with their crystalline eyes, cold Kravax warlords armored in obsidian plating, delicate silk-winged diplomats from the outer rim, all watched her with mounting unease and growing alarm. Lyra did not wait for formal greetings or procedural niceties. "You have no idea what you've done," she rasped, her voice raw and trembling with exhaustion. "You let them in." A visible ripple of confusion and tension spread through the assembled council. She raised one shaking hand and activated the full data stream. File after damning file flooded the chamber, videos, medical analyses, survival statistics. Each piece of evidence more nightmarish than the last. A human soldier, missing an arm and bleeding profusely, still dragging his wounded comrade through enemy fire. A human child surviving a fall from low orbit after her body instinctively entered a protective shutdown state. A human patient with third-degree burns across 68% of his body regenerating functional new skin in mere weeks. With every new piece of evidence, the council chamber grew progressively quieter, the air thickening with dread. Lyra's voice rose, cracking with barely contained hysteria. "They don't heal like us. They refuse to accept death. Their very DNA seems coated with pure, stubborn defiance of natural law. You could drop a single human onto a molten planet and within 10 generations they would be mining the core for sport and building vacation resorts on the lava flows." One ancient Vayari counselor finally spoke, his voice calm yet strained. "Surely. This must be some form of exaggeration." Lyra laughed. It was a horrible, broken sound that echoed through the transmission like shattering crystal. She played the final video without comment. A human soldier, both legs severed, one eye destroyed, crawled across a blood-soaked battlefield using only his elbows and raw willpower. No painkillers. No advanced armor. Just bleeding determination. He reached his fallen comrade, tied a makeshift tourniquet with his teeth, and continued fighting until reinforcements arrived. The entire council chamber fell into stunned, suffocating silence. Lyra stepped closer to the camera, her green eyes blazing with feverish terror. "I have studied life for 240 years, she said, her voice dropping to a deadly, trembling whisper. "I have witnessed stars born and stars die. I have catalogued the biology of 1,400 distinct species. But nothing, in this vast universe is as fundamentally wrong as human biology. She slammed both hands onto the podium, leaning forward until her face dominated every screen. They feel pain that would kill us instantly. They survive injuries that should end them within minutes. Their blood clots almost immediately. Their bones fracture and heal stronger than before. Their minds reject defeat even when their bodies are screaming for the release of death. Her voice cracked painfully. And the worst part? They know they are broken. And they are proud of it. In the back row, a human diplomat sat quietly, watching the proceedings. He offered a small, calm, utterly confident smile. Lyra pointed directly at him, her fingers shaking with a mixture of rage and terror. That smile is why every single one of you should be terrified beyond measure. Chaos erupted across the transmission. Delegates shouted demands for immediate quarantine of the entire Sol system. Others called frantically for the mobilization of extermination fleets. A few, in voices trembling with genuine panic, suggested forming a desperate alliance before it was too late to negotiate. Lyra stood motionless in the center of the storm, physically exhausted, trembling violently, yet strangely exhilarated by the catharsis of finally speaking the truth aloud. Because she had seen it clearly. Humanity was not simply another species attempting to survive in a hostile universe. They were a biological singularity. A living glitch written into the very fabric of reality itself. The transmission feed began to destabilize under the sheer volume of overlapping panicked voices. Lyra looked straight into the camera one final time, her voice soft yet carrying the unmistakable weight of prophecy. If we do not contain them now, they will outlive every single one of us. The screen went dark. Lyra collapsed forward onto the podium, breathing in ragged gasps, tears streaming unchecked down her face. In the silent archive room behind her, the last open file on the main display blinked ominously. Project, Humanity, Status, Uncontainable. She stared at those words for a very long time. Then, in a broken whisper that no one else would ever hear, she murmured, "The galaxy just woke up something that was never meant to exist. And it is already far too late to put it back." The galactic concord descended rapidly into chaos. Lyra watched the unfolding fallout from the station's main observation deck like a ghost haunting the ruins of her own sanity. Far below, Earth continued its slow, peaceful rotation in the void, beautiful, blue, and deceptively innocent. Around her, the station buzzed with frantic activity. Entire fleets were being urgently redirected. Ancient interstellar treaties were being torn apart in emergency sessions. Entire civilizations began preparing contingency evacuation protocols. All of it triggered by one single species that simply refused to obey any of the established rules of life. She had not slept in 6 days. Her deep cerulean skin had taken on an ashen, unhealthy pallor. The once vibrant bioluminescent patterns across her face and body now flickered weakly, like dying embers struggling against the dark. Her light green eyes were sunken, bloodshot, and filled with a feverish, unbreakable intensity. Wet strands of dark hair remained plastered to her forehead and neck. She looked every bit the prophet who had glimpsed the end of ordered existence and survived only long enough to deliver the warning. A priority transmission chimed urgently. It was the High Speaker himself, the single most powerful voice in the entire Concord. Dr. Lyra. The Council demands your complete, unfiltered presentation in 6 hours. They are afraid. Lyra let out a bitter, exhausted laugh that echoed hollowly in the observation deck. They should be. She prepared the final presentation with hands that would not stop shaking. Every slide felt like loading a live weapon. Every statistic felt like a dagger aimed straight at the heart of galactic civilization. When the appointed hour arrived, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its collective breath. Lyra stood alone on the central platform, bathed in harsh white light. 23 species watched her in absolute, oppressive silence. The air itself felt thick with dread. She began without any introduction or pleasantries. Honored Council, I present to you the most dangerous organism ever discovered by sentient life. Humans can continue to function, to fight, to run, even to laugh, while enduring pain levels that would instantly kill most of us. One soldier continued accurate combat operations with a shattered femur, third-degree burns across his torso, and a collapsed lung. He refused all painkillers. He fought for 4 additional hours. Gasps and murmurs rippled visibly through the assembled delegates. A liver can fully regrow in mere weeks. Damaged muscle tissue repairs itself stronger than its original state. Even significant portions of the brain demonstrate spontaneous rewiring. One human lost nearly 40% of his cerebral cortex and regained complete cognitive function within 18 months. A delicate silk-winged diplomat from the outer colonies fainted outright. Their white blood cells do not simply defend the organism, they hunt invaders like apex predators. They retain perfect memory of every threat and actively train successor generations to be deadlier. One individual survived and weaponized 14 plagues that had previously annihilated entire colonies of other species. The chamber grew deathly quiet. Lyra stepped closer to the transmission camera, her green eyes blazing with intensity. And perhaps the most disturbing aspect: psychological resilience. Humans endure trauma that should shatter any sane mind beyond repair. Instead, they adapt. They transform horror into strength. They form bonds so profound they would rather perish than abandon one another. They laugh defiantly in the face of extinction. She paused. The silence in the chamber felt suffocating. One colony ship crashed on a Class 9 death world. Toxic atmosphere. Lethal radiation storms. No resources whatsoever. All 312 humans survived. And not only survived, they thrived. Within 3 generations they had built a fully functioning settlement. A massive Kravax warlord slammed his armored fist onto the table with enough force to crack the surface. "This is utter madness." Lyra laughed, a sharp, broken, terrifying sound. "Madness? No. This is simply human biology." She leaned forward until her face filled every screen across the galaxy. "They are not built for passive survival. They are built for war. Their own bodies function as weapons aimed at the universe itself. They feel pain. Yet they refuse to let it stop them. They break. And return stronger. They die. And sometimes even death itself fails to hold them." Her voice dropped to a deadly whisper that somehow carried more power than any scream. "And they know they are broken. And they are proud of it." The human diplomat in the back row smiled again, calm, confident, and almost amused. Lyra pointed directly at him, her finger trembling with raw emotion. "That smile is why every single one of you should be terrified beyond words." Chaos exploded across the chamber. Delegates shouted for immediate quarantine. Others demanded preemptive military strikes. A few, their voices trembling with genuine panic, suggested desperate diplomatic alliances before negotiation became impossible. Lyra stood motionless at the center of the storm, exhausted beyond all measure, yet strangely exhilarated by the act of finally speaking the truth she had discovered. Because she had seen it with perfect clarity. Humanity was not merely surviving the universe. They were actively rewriting its most fundamental rules. The transmission feed began to destabilize under the overwhelming volume of panicked voices. Lyra looked straight into the camera one final time, her voice soft yet ringing with prophetic dread. "The galaxy must now decide. Befriend the monster. Or attempt to kill something that was never meant to die." The screen went dark. Lyra collapsed forward onto the podium, breathing in ragged, exhausted gasps, tears streaming silently down her face. In the quiet that followed, only one thought echoed endlessly in her shattered mind: it was already too late. The monster had awakened. And it was smiling. The final transmission was broadcast simultaneously to every civilized world, every remote colony, and every deep space outpost across the known galaxy. Lyra stood alone on the central platform, bathed in cold, unforgiving white light. She appeared as a shattered prophet who had stared too long into the abyss. Her once radiant deep blue skin looked pale and lifeless. The elegant bioluminescent patterns that had once flowed gracefully across her face, neck, and shoulders were now reduced to faint, irregular flickers, weak pulses of dying green and sickly yellow. Her large light green eyes were deeply sunken, bloodshot, and carried the haunted intensity of someone who had witnessed the death of reason itself. Wet strands of dark hair stuck to her forehead and neck from days of unrelenting nervous sweat. She had not slept in 9 days. This was no longer merely a scientific presentation. This was a confession from the absolute edge of madness. A final, desperate warning. A broken prayer offered to a galaxy on the brink of irreversible change. She looked directly into the camera, her voice steady at first, yet laced with raw, barely controlled emotion. "I came to this station as the greatest xenobiologist of my era," she began slowly, her tone soft yet piercing through the heavy silence. "I arrived expecting to document yet another primitive newcomer species finding its place among the stars. Instead, I witnessed something far greater. And infinitely more terrifying. I witnessed what can only be described as both a miracle and a curse." The entire galaxy watched in absolute, breathless silence. Lyra continued, choosing each word with painful, deliberate care. "Humans are not supposed to exist. Their biology violates every fundamental law we once believed governed life throughout this universe. They are over-engineered, over-resilient, over everything. Their bodies refuse to accept the natural, inevitable cycle of decay and death that constrains all other species. They endure pain that would kill us instantly, yet they continue moving forward. They suffer catastrophic injuries that should end them within minutes, yet they heal stronger than before. Their blood clots almost immediately. Their bones fracture and rebuild tougher than their original state. Their minds reject any notion of surrender even when their flesh screams for the mercy of oblivion." She paused, allowing the heavy silence to press down upon every listener like a physical weight. "They survive in environments where no form of life should possibly endure. They adapt under conditions where adaptation should be biologically impossible. They laugh defiantly in the face of certain extinction. And the most horrifying truth of all. They know exactly how broken they are." A small, bitter smile crossed her lips for the briefest moment. "And they are proud of it." Lyra took one slow step closer to the camera, her green eyes now filling every screen across trillions of sentient beings. "I have witnessed stars born and stars die. I have catalogued the biology of 1,400 distinct species. I have watched civilizations rise and crumble across centuries of careful observation. But in all my long life, nothing has ever been as wrong, as strangely beautiful, or as utterly terrifying as human biology." Her voice cracked with profound exhaustion. "They are a glitch. A beautiful, terrible, unstoppable glitch written directly into the fabric of reality itself. The universe attempted to create life that was fragile, temporary, and carefully balanced. And instead, it accidentally birthed something that refuses to die even when the cosmos itself demands it." She drew in one deep, shuddering breath, her patterns flaring weakly one final time. "So I ask you, humanity, wherever you are watching this transmission." Her voice dropped to a raw, trembling whisper that somehow reached every corner of the galaxy. "What the hell is wrong with your biology?" The vast council chamber remained deathly silent. Lyra's patterns flared with one last, desperate burst of green light before fading almost completely. Then she delivered her closing words, soft yet filled with both profound awe and bone-deep dread, "Because if you are the answer to that question, then the universe has already lost." She stood motionless for a long moment as silent tears traced slow paths down her blue cheeks. "The galaxy will never be the same again. We can attempt to quarantine you. We can choose to fear you. We can even try to destroy you. But deep in our hearts, we all now understand the inescapable truth." She smiled, tired, broken, yet strangely at peace. "You were never meant to survive this universe. And that is precisely why you will outlive every single one of us." The transmission ended. Back in the quiet, dimly lit archive room, Lyra closed the final file with a single trembling finger. The massive screen went mercifully dark. She sank slowly to the cold metal floor, leaning her back wearily against the wall. For the first time in many days, her body finally allowed itself to relax. The frantic flickering of her bioluminescent patterns stilled completely. Through the viewport, Earth continued its peaceful, unhurried rotation, small, blue, and deceptively innocent. Somewhere on that world, billions of humans were waking up to yet another ordinary day. They were laughing, arguing, loving, struggling, and fighting through their beautifully chaotic lives. Completely unaware that an entire advanced galaxy now trembled in collective fear at the mere thought of what made them human. Lyra closed her eyes. One final tear escaped and rolled down her cheek. In the heavy, profound silence, she whispered the last truth she would ever speak. What the hell is wrong with human biology? Is that nothing in this universe can stop it? And for the first time since she had opened those cursed files, Lyra allowed herself a small, exhausted smile. Not a smile of joy, but the smile of someone who had stared into the abyss for far too long. And finally watched the abyss smile back. The glitch had fully awakened. And the universe would never be the same again. Subscribe.